The large cruiser of 1910 SMS Seydlitz was an improvement on the preceding ships from Fondan to Ginzelet, saw service throughout World War I, taking part in several engagements, including Jutland, where she was severely battered by her Royal Navy counterparts, with other engagements raging from the North Sea against the Royal Navy to facing off against elements of the Russian Baltic Fleet. But, like almost every other German battlecruiser, Seydlitz met a similar end in Gapaflow in June 1919. In those battles, especially Jutland, Seydlitz took a beating. I mean, look at this photo of her coming back from the Battle of Jutland on June 1st, 1916. Or this one, when she was back in Wilhelmshaven. But in a previous battle, Seydlitz was almost entirely destroyed due to a hit to her rear turrets, and through it, it caused changes in the German high seas fleet concerning gunnery safety. In today's video, we'll take a look at the near destruction of SMS Seydlitz at Dogger Background Battle Bank following the raids in Great Yarmouth and especially Scarborough, Hartlepool, and Whitby in mid-December 1914, and the unsuccessful attempt to catch the German scouting groups. Admiral David Bay was given permission to make his permanent base at Rosyth in the 5th of 4th to be closer in case of a German attack, which came in late January 1915. Admiral Fran von Hipper, commander of the German scouting groups, was to carry out an advance on the Dogger Bank, using the battlecruiser Seydlitz M. Defa and the large armored cruiser Bla. The light cruisers Rostock, Strand, Kolberg, and Groud, along with 2 destroyer flotillas, leaving by 5:45 p.m. on January 23rd. Through successful decoding by Room 40, the British were aware that the Germans were planning an advance. The Admiralty under Winston Churchill and Jacques Fieser decided that a joint force would be suitable to intercept the German ships, setting a rendezvous for 7 a.m. on the morning of January 24th, 1915, sending out telegrams by 1 p.m. on the 23rd to Jello Bay and Tet, which reads as follows: 4 German battlecruisers, 6 light cruisers, and 22 destroyers will sail this evening to scout on Dogger Bank, probably returning tomorrow evening. All available battlecruisers, light cruisers, and destroyers from Rosyth should proceed to rendezvous, arriving at 7 a.m. Tomorrow, Commodore T. Tet is to proceed with all available destroyers and light cruisers from Herch to join Vice Admiral L. Bay at 700 a.m. At the above rendezvous, if the enemy is sighted by Commodore T. while crossing their line of advance, they should be attacked. Wireless telegraphy is not to be used unless necessary. The British Admiral's plan was set in motion. B's 5 battlecruisers and Goodoff's 4 light cruisers coming down from the first berth of 4th would meet at dawn with TS, 3 light cruisers and 35 destroyers, while older pre-dreadnoughts and armored cruisers positioned themselves 40 miles to the northwest of Bay to intercept Hipper if he turned north. Jello was to be further northward, ready to intervene if the high sea fleet sailed out. After sailing Beatty's 5 battlecruisers, Lion, Princess Royal, Tiger, New Zealand, and Indomitable, reports came pouring in early on the 24th. Beeson Young, serving aboard Lion as a lieutenant, had this to say: "The eastern horizon showed light, but it was still dark night about us. At 6:45, signals were beginning to come in from the Haraj flotilla, indicating that the rendezvous chosen by the Admiralty had been hit exactly at 10 minutes to 7. I went down to breakfast, and when I returned 15 minutes later, the daylight was beginning to spread and the cloud banks to roll away. It promised to be an ideal morning with a light breeze from the north-northeast and a slight swell on the sea. At 7, the bugle sounded, action at 7:20. A signal from Aurora, one of Tet's leading ships, reported that she was in action, causing BD to order the battlecruiser southeast at 22 knots. On the German side, Hipper on board Seydlitz, the flagship of the first scouting group, and the scouting groups as a whole spotted 7 British light cruisers and more than 20 British destroyers to the northwest of his position, running on a parallel course out of gun range. He understood that this was no mere patrolling force, and at 7:35 a.m., he signaled that the entire force should turn to the southeast and run for home at 20 knots, and if necessary, up to 23 knots, as that was the top speed of Bla. Hipper soon sent a message to the Commander-in-Chief of the High Seas Fleet, Admiral Frick von Ingel, and the High Seas Fleet would put out to sea later that morning by 8 a.m. The chase was on with the British forces pursuing ER on a parallel course. Tret and Goodenoug's light forces attempted an attack, but it was ineffectual, and Bay ordered them to stay out of the way as the battle became a straightforward stern chase where he hoped to destroy the enemy by long-range gunfire. Speed in this engagement became the key to success. On the bridge of line, Bay turned to the chief engineer Percy Green and said, "Tell your stokers, all depends on them." Green responded, "They know that, sir." Bay continued to ask for more and more speed. Eventually, by 8:54 a.m., he signaled the battlecruisers to a speed of 29 knots, something that the older New Zealand and Indomitable could not do, having a designed top speed of 25 knots. A was willing to take the risk of fighting Hipper, 3 ships to 4, if that meant he could catch up with the Germans. By 8:52, the first ranging salvos were fired, and soon, the rearmost of the German ships was being straddled, but the German ships were hitting back, with Zetz joining the fight at 9:19. But she received her first hit only 6 minutes later on the Foch. Slowly Zetz continued to steer southeast by east, but soon enough the near-fatal hit would come at 9:43 or 10:43, as we'll be dealing with German quotes here in a minute. The most critical point for Zetz's hit in the Battle of Dogger Bank was at 10:43 a.m. As the ships of the first scouting group were heading back to Germany, a shell fired from Lion struck the barbed of D turret. Robert K. Massey has this to say in his book Castles of Steel, Britain, Germany, in the winning of the Great War at Sea. The powder charges being brought up were ignited by the explosion and flash fire, shot upward into the turret, setting fire to the charges being delivered to the gun and downward into the magazine. The magazine crew, seared by flames, tried to flee forward by opening the steel doors leading to the compartments of the adjacent turret. Results: the fire spread forward, setting a light that charges there, spreading to the adjacent magazine and upward to C turret. Zetz now faced the danger of a final annihilating explosion that would detonate all magazines and cause the ship to disintegrate. 3 men saved her: Lieutenant Commander Hayden, Chief Artificer Hing, and Gunner's Mate Mula. Making their way through the searing heat to the valves for flooding the magazines, they spun the handles and drowned the threat of explosion by permitting 600 tons of seawater to flow into the magazines. Remarkably, although 65 men had been killed and 2 over 5 turrets destroyed, Zetz not only survived, but continued in action and maintained her speed. It was an extraordinary demonstration of the excellence of German warship design and the extensive watertight subdivision of her hull, taking from German battle cruisers of World War I, their design, construction, and operations by Gary Steff. He writes, then suddenly, at 10:43 she received a hit with fatal consequences. A shell fired from line struck the barbette of D turret. The 13.5-in shell passed through the battery deck and struck the 230 mm thick turret barbette where it detonated. A red-hot piece of barbette armor was broken off and was thrown into the working chamber, where it set fire to the main and 4 charges. There no enemy shell parts were found in the working chamber. Flash flames shot upwards into the turret and downwards through the elevator shafts, setting fire to the cartridges in the turret, on the handling room turntable, and the elevator room. Only the cartridge containers with their lids still on did not burn with the first penetration of the flash flames and poisonous gases from boning cartridge cases. The crew of the handling room of D turret sought to save themselves by exiting their room and escaping into the corresponding room of C turret. To do this, they had to pass through double doors, the first of which opened aft and the second forward. Investigation later showed that the second door was carried away as though by the pressure of gases. With the opening of these doors, flash flames passed into the cartridge hoist room, handling room of the C turret, and the deadly events were repeated in just a few seconds. 6,000 kilograms of powder burnt totally, burning out turrets C and D and sending flames mast high. 62 powder charges, including those in the munitions chamber, had completely burnt in the 2 turrets. A total of 165 men eventually lost their lives, the medical report read. 1 part of the turret's crew were burned by the flash flame. but the greater part of the corpses were in the position in which death had surprised them. Individual corpses were completely burned. Another part of the turret crew had succumbed to gas inhalation. 5 were wounded with burns, 3 from turret C and 2 from turret D, and 1 could be saved. One of them, a sailor, had first and second degree burns to his entire body and succumbed to his injuries on the same afternoon. On board of the remaining 4, 2, a stoker and a sailor, had first and second degree burns on their whole bodies. The other 2 were a machinist mate with first and second degree burns to both hands and a sailor with light burns to the face and body. The sailor Matos Andon was a loading number of the left barrel of turret Caesar, turret Ka. He wrote, "Now we loading numbers went at it, beginning with the shell push. Jerk it went into the barrel. Under our exertions, the cartridge followed the same 4 gasps. A jerk breech LCK closed tight," he continued. Suddenly, there was a crash, almost like a concussion. What was that? We looked at each other for a fraction of a second. Listened, that was no concussion. There was a hissing near us. In the next moment, a great flash of flame climbed high into the middle of the turret. The turret leader and order transmitter were enveloped by the glowing flames. At the same moment, then a second, still larger flash struck up under me, directly from the entry hole to the reloading chamber, working chamber, and hit me in the face. I fell backwards. The entire turret was engulfed in bright flames. At that same moment, an invisible force pushed me. Luckily, I was propelled to where the entry hole was. I allowed myself to fall out. The first officer Corvette and Captain Fausta later wrote on this occasion, "Turrets C and DD did not respond. It became clear that they were dealing with a powder fire in these turrets, in their munition chambers or magazines. Therefore, I first gave the command to flood compartment 3, which was the compartment where both these turrets and their magazines were located. Thus, flooding the lower part of the ship, I looked AF towards turrets C and D. It was an electrifying sight. The AF part of the ship was enveloped in a blue-red flash flame that reached to the height of the mast tops. The munition chambers of both turrets were therefore enveloped in flame, and it could only be seconds before the entire ship would be engulfed and explode. It only remained for us to shoot as quickly as possible to perhaps achieve something in the last moments. So he gave the command for rapid fire, and nay, a heavy or medium salvo was discharged from the guns every 10 seconds. In the leak central or damage control center, news of the catastrophic Rick hit reached the first officer, Corvette and Capan, Hegedon together with the pun, MAA vom Heidkamp and Fula. He went after to compartment 3, where the flooding valves for the AF turret group magazines were located. Putin MAA Heidkamp was first to enter compartment 3. The heat was intense, and the smoke and poison gases were choking, so his uniform, hair, and eyebrows were singed. The blinding gases made finding the valves almost impossible, because flashlights could not penetrate the thick smoke. But Pum and Meister Heidkamp knew their location from memory, as he had been assigned to the Bloom-Andel shipyard during construction of the Panoa. When he had finally reached the valves, he found that they were glowing red-hot, but selflessly he grasped the first valve steel operating wheel and turned it. Then he went to work on the second wheel, before he had to be replaced by Flya Mola, who completed the task. Punmi Heidkamp suffered bad burns to his hands, right to the bone, and his lungs were injured by the hot poisonous gases. Nevertheless, the AFT magazine chambers were flooded and the ship was saved from probable aftermath destruction. The Battle of Dogger Bank continued, and Zetz received one further heavy caliber hit, which struck amidships, but did not penetrate the armor belt at 10:32. Remember, this is now Greenwich Mean Time, like in the beginning of the video. The upper rudder room was again occupied, and at 10:50, the lower rudder room. In the meantime, Lion had turned away due to Beatty spotting what he had thought was a U-boat, even though there was none in the area, leading to a confusing situation. His Lion became more damaged as well, where the British ships focused on the crippled Blah, allowing the German ships to retreat and head back to Germany. Zitz made it back to Wilhelmshaven, where she went into the Imperial Dockyard for repairs, remaining there until April 1st, 1915. The Battle of Dogger Bank revealed the vulnerability of ships to shells fired at long range in a high arcing trajectory. before plunging down steeply on enemy decks that had been unknown before the battle. The Germans learned a vital lesson from the battle: the near-fatal damage to the flagship of the first scouting group caused changes in the fleet, understanding the flashlight qualities of an explosive fire, and the realization that a fire in the turret system must not be allowed to penetrate the magazine. In a report from Captain von Egedy, he writes, afterwards, "A thorough examination showed everything had been done in accordance with regulations. I told the gunnery officer if we lose 190 men in almost the whole ship in accordance with regulations, then they are somehow wrong, so we made technical improvements and changed our training methods as well as the regulations. Almost losing a ship is bad enough, but it being the flagship of the scouting groups makes things even more complicated, with Admiral Franz von Hipp on board. Yes, I understand he got his title at Jot. Losing a critical figure like that would be really unthinkable. Something that was emphasized by my friend Anchored Past. Go check out his channel and his video on Dogger Bank, link in the description." Commander-in-Chief of the High Seas Fleet, Frick von Ingel, had several conclusions concerning the near-fatal hit. The detonation effect of the shell was mainly against the rooms outside the barbette and on the fishing deck. Only stray pieces of armor and flash flame seemed to have penetrated into the barbette. Shell parts were not found in the working chamber. In the working chamber, the 4 charges and main charges present were ignited by shot either through the flash of the shell detonation or by the hot fragments of the barbette armor. The flames struck upwards into the turret and below into the munition room and ignited the powder in both. Obviously, with the first burst of flames, the men in the munitions room fled forward to the cartridge loading room of turret SE, and of the double doors that led there, the first opened AF and the second opened forwards. The second was carried away as though from gas pressure, and in this manner flashed into the surrounding rooms and up towards the guns of the 4 charges. All those out of their packing tins had been burnt, as had those in their tins that were open. Of the main charges, only those outside their tins burnt, although the heat in the chamber was so intense that in some cases the zinc of the tins had melted in places. No armor-piercing shells detonated. The following conclusions were reached. The munition in the working chamber represented a danger to the turret. This should be changed as intended with the 38 cm guns. The shells and cartridge hoist elevators must be equipped with doors that automatically close themselves with the passing of the hoist. The 4 chargers must be protected against flash until they're up in the gun. The main charges must be protected by a cover. The cover will only be removed prior to loading. New ships must be equipped with separate munition rooms for each turret. The doors between the ammunition rooms for the adjacent turrets of the ship when in service must be locked with padlocks to prevent premature opening. The key locks must be with the turret officer during battle. The order to open may only be given when all the munitions from the turret is fired. The cartridge tin covers may only be removed when the cartridge is required. The present type of fastener screw claps was presumably loosened before the beginning of the battle. In the future, an improved type of fastener is required. The bayonet clasp with the ready cartridges in the heavy turrets must be prevented from piling up. Armor-piercing shells have proved to be neutral in the existing cases of fire. High explosive shells are in question after the experience of SMS Goeben. Therefore, high explosive cannot be recommended for the ready munition of the heavy artillery. No more for charges than main charge cartridges. Another quote from von Ingenite is as follows: "The working chamber is a danger to the entire turret. In all new construction, it must be eliminated. Shell and cordite hoist must be equipped with doors that close automatically after the charges have passed. The charges must be delivered to the guns in flame-proof covering. The doors connecting the magazines to adjacent turrets must be secured with padlocks to prevent premature opening. The key must be in the custody of the turret officer, and the order to open only given when all the turret's ammunition has been fired." The German Navy worked quickly to install elaborate anti-flash shutters between the turrets and magazines in all battleships and battlecruisers, along with preventing the risk of fires by limiting the amount of powder and other combustible agents in the turret handling rooms. I think an interesting conclusion to this video is actually from the Battle of Jutland, as Seydlitz was hit by Queen Mary. Her gunnery officer wrote then, approximately 10 minutes after opening fire, Puba reported to me by telephone, turret Caesar does not give any answer from that. Speaking tube of turret Caesar, smoke is penetrating the artillery central. This was exactly the same report I received on January 24th on the Dogger Bank. Also at the battle's beginning, I therefore knew what this report signified. The cartridges were in flames and the turret was put out of action almost mechanically. I gave the order. Slud magazine of turret C. This would put the chamber underwater and prevent further damage as found in Gary Stathgager, the Battle of Jutland. Through German eyes. Well, von Eggy writes, therefore, we made technical improvements and changed our methods of training as well as the regulations. This time only one cartridge caught fire. The flash did not reach the magazines, and so we only lost 20 dead or severely burned, and only one turret was put out of action. I find it extremely interesting that Seydlitz not only survived both engagements, but the new equipment and regulations were used to such effect at Jutland. Seydlitz is a conclusion. Testament to the quality of the Panoa of the German High Seas Fleet, as Corvette and Captain Vollen put in a memorandum discussing the design of Zets in the type development of ANKOA. Since 07, inspired by the English Invincible class, we have increasingly pursued the qualities of a fast battleship to make the authorized number of large ships, as far as possible, also capable of fighting. In the line, this approach of Osinqua since 07 has given them a different character to the English and has brought their displacement to that of battleships, continuing the English battleship cruisers to stand against our cruiser battleships. Thank you all for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, as it'll help the channel to grow. Until next time, my friends, have a great week.